The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second session online today from Smart Vision Europe. And the session today is about SAS Visual Analytics. So this is something that we do on a fairly regular basis, where we pick a topic or an area that we want to talk about. It might be a piece of software, it might be a particular application within the analytics industry, and we talk about it for 40 minutes to an hour or so. So far today we've been talking about machine learning and blue sky statistics. Now we've got SAS Visual Analytics, and then after this we've got a little session on IBM SPSS Modeler. If you're familiar with us, then you'll know that on our website we've got lots of recordings of previous sessions. So, if this is interesting to you, you might want to have a nose around and see if there's anything else on there. There's also a lot of videos. My name's Jonathan Quinn. I'm an analytics consultant, and I'm joined online today by my colleague Rachel Clinton. And Rachel's sort of fielding the administration side of making sure everybody's logged on correctly. If you don't know what normally happens here, we've got a few housekeeping type of issues that we deal with right away. First of all, we record these sessions. We record them so you can go back and listen to them again if you want. There is some slideware. It's not a huge amount, but we always email out a PDF copy to you after the session has ended. And if you want to find out what other events are running, you want to sign up for them, then just go on to our website. It's lots of materials on there, and we've got a fairly extensive list of sessions that we're running. Usually once or twice a month we pick a day and pick a bunch of topics, and that extends all the way to the end of May, I think. Now, with regard to asking questions, unfortunately all the lines are muted, so you can hear me but I can't hear you, so we ask you to use the chat facility, and Rachel will field them as we're going along. If there's anything here that we can't answer at this point in time, obviously we will follow up with you offline afterwards. And also, if there's anything that you think is particularly useful or relevant to colleagues, and you think that maybe it might be relevant for us to rerun a session for you, maybe a private session for your organization, definitely reach out to us or drop us an email, and we can talk about doing that. Okay, so first of all, with regard to who we are a technology provider specializing in advanced analytics. We're a gold partner to SAS. We're also a premier IBM business partner, looking at the IBM's advanced analytics suite, which is the SPSS suite. And we're also a provider of a tool called Blue Sky Statistics, which is an R-based entry-level analytics tool. We're a relatively small organization, but we're pretty much steeped within the analytics industry. We've all got at least 15 to 25 years of experience working in advanced and predictive analytics. And I've personally worked for SPSS, IBM, and SAS in the past as a consultant in analytics. So this is something that we're fairly comfortable with as a discipline, and something that we've got a lot of experience with in lots of different areas, lots of different sectors, such as retail and utilities and not-for-profit and telecommunications. So analytics is very much our bag, and we're familiar with the market of analytics and the way in which that term is stretched, and to cover all sorts of different types of tools and all sorts of different types of approaches. Now, within a typical business, if you look at the sort of analytics landscape, you're going to get very often BI type tools or management information. So that will take the form of reports and dashboards, maybe Tableau, it might be Cognos or Business Objects, something like that. There's usually a fair amount of that within an organization. There may indeed even be more than one platform that they're using, and that's before we even get into things like Microsoft Office, where we're looking at Excel as a way to report and analyze data. Then you tend to have things like a lot of charting and visualization tools. So this is, visualization and charting is a very hot topic at the moment, and there's some really nice technology out there that's dedicated to producing very nice charts and very nice visualizations, alternatives to the sort of traditional visualizations, if you like. But then, of course, there's this whole area of predictive analytics. So you've got like classical statistics, you've got predictive modeling, you've got machine learning, data mining, and even things like scenario planning and what-if analysis. And this could be used in anywhere from segmentation work, we're trying to cluster similar customers together, to predictive modeling, we're trying to predict people who are likely to cancel a subscription or visit a store again within 6 weeks, or people who are likely to be high credit risk or whatever. So that's a whole division very often of analytics in and of itself. And very often these very much appear as islands within the organization, different tools used by different people on different platforms to do different things, all under the banner term of analytics, if you like. And then that's even before you get into things like the fact that the data that you're using has to be stored somewhere, and somebody very often has to prepare it. This is particularly true for things like traditional BI. We're talking about cubes and so on. People have actually got to rely on specialists to prepare that data, to update it, and to create measures for you. And then very often you even have situations where somebody else is in charge of deploying or integrating the results so that they can be sent out to customers, to clients, to internal stakeholders on various platforms, whether it be mobile or through their own PCs. So the more you start to look at it, the more sort of complex the landscape is, and there's a lot of historical depth there, a lot of reason why people have developed these different sort of islands of tools. And very much SAS Visual Analytics is, from SAS's standpoint, an attempt to consolidate a lot of these challenges around analytics and around the disparate channels of analytics across an organization to try and create a kind of one-stop shop, a central hub, if you like. And SAS Visual Analytics is very much, their standard bearer for that. It is augmented, of course, if you're aware of it, by SAS Visual Statistics, which is kind of an augmentation of that. It allows us to do a lot of these predictive modeling and get into a lot of the higher end statistics. And we'll allude to that when we do a little demo later on. But if you want to find out how the SAS Visual Analytics kind of fits together, then this is a very common infographic or a schema that you'll see across the internet in various guises. That there are many different roles. You've got people who are fairly analytically savvy. You've got people who are stakeholders. You've got people who are reasonably analytically savvy. They know what sort of analysis they want to do. And you've got people who who are very technical with regard to the administration of systems, with regard to the preparing of data. So it makes sense, therefore, to have a sort of central platform, a central hub, where somebody can prepare the data. So you have a data preparation module there. You've got an explorer for people to do ad hoc analysis. They can build their own sorts of reports, do their own sort of analytics. You have a designer, which is for people who are a little bit more advanced in analytics, and maybe can who are charged with actually producing reports, interactive insight, if you like, which is then surfaced in some way to an audience of internal stakeholders or external clients on a variety of different platforms, whether it be your phone, a tablet, or a Mac, or a PC, or whatever. So SAS Visual Analytics is a single solution, a central entry hub that tries to combine all of these different elements together. It sits on top of what's called a SAS Laser Analytics server. This is an in-memory server, which means it's fast, basically, and it means it's very, very scalable. So one of the points of pride that SAS like to talk about is the fact that they can load in billions of rows of data if they so wish, to produce reports in real time based upon that. So it's pretty beefy, if you like. So if we want to have a little look at it, I've got a little example here. I'm actually going to jump out to another connection. So at the moment here, what you're seeing is this hub, the same sort of, exactly the same thing you saw earlier on. If I just Alt-Tab back to that, that's pretty much, it is this point here. We've got preparation, explorer, designer, and then this sort of viewer or mobile BI, and it's shown here in a browser. It's on a machine which I'm connected to. You can see this connection up here, and the machine is somewhere in the US, I guess. So this stuff works quite well across a wide area network. The machine's quite fast, it's pretty beefy, but the connection, of course, across the Atlantic is a little bit iffy at times, so you just need to bear that in mind. So I would suggest that if you want to get into it, you start familiarizing yourself with this hub and the fact that you may have different rules. Depending on who you are, you're going to see different things here. This could be easily integrated with your own internal intranet, if you like. You can have your own style sheets, etc. And this is just the vanilla. Here we've got different samples. We've got alerts. We've got the ability to search through. Very much the sort of thing that you would expect. We've got an administrator hub here, which would control, who can connect and what they can do. We've got a data preparation button here, which allows us to join tables together. For example, if we need to do something fancy and go and create, do something to the data to try and create new measures or amalgamate the data in such a way that we can analyze it. And then we get into things like the Explorer for ad hoc analysis, Report Designer, which allows us to have a little bit more control over the analytics that we're doing, a little bit more customization, and the viewer, if you like. So if I click on the viewer here, it will take us to a report that's been created. And this report here is called the Digital Intelligence Report. So it doesn't matter. I happen to be looking at this on a browser, on a machine in the it's somewhere in the US, but I could easily be connecting to it through a tablet or through my phone. And what we're seeing here is a typical sort of dashboard. We're seeing information here about people who are visiting a website that's actually a SAS website, and we're seeing these things like a nested pie chart here, where the internal circle refers to, as you can see here, returning visitors, and the external circle here refers to new visitors, with two different visitor types here. We can see, for example, that returning visitors are more likely to arrive at that site through a direct visit, which is 59%, versus new visitors who are more likely to arrive they're less likely to arrive through a direct visit and more likely to arrive through an organic search trying to get to that site. And then we have stuff about the operating system that they're using, and we have the frequency or the traffic source of the visit over time. So here we're running from the 29th of March or thereabouts up until the 3rd of May. And of course, as you might expect, these are actually interactive reports. So if I click on, for example here, green new visitor, that actually highlights the information in the traffic source. So we're just looking at those. We're just looking at that group, people who are new visitors and who are arriving here via organic search. And here are the various operating systems that they happen to be using. Subtly in the background here, they have a little filter drop down, which has also been added to the report. They've done some sort of segmentation where they've said, okay, we've got some sort of inferred life stage. This could be something like, if you're familiar with things like Mosaic or Prism or anything like that, these are geodemographics, or you could be maybe you have your own customer segments. So you could say, yeah, but I just want to look at people who are, let's pick a big group here, like striving singles or something like that. Click on that, and that suddenly filters just by that group. So we've got these different dimensions and ways in which we can drill into this data. In the same sense here, if I click on the operating system here, where it says Windows, it says Windows 7, it's a direct visit where traffic source we're looking at. If I drill into that, I can drill down into the browser type, say, okay, well, what browser types have we got on Windows 7? There's Google Chrome, here's Internet Explorer, etc. We can continue to drill down into the version of that browser type, so we can say, well, what browser version are they using, and drill down into that. So clearly there's some sort of interaction going on here between these different groups as I click on them. If I want to switch that off again, I just basically click on a neutral part of the screen, and I can come back and go back to the top of the hierarchy or go back up here. And if I want to select more than one group, I can just start to select more than one group, and as you can see them, they start to appear and increase over time. So this is a really simple digital traffic report that we've got here. In the background up here, we've got actually other ones. We've got digital visitation here, which is another set of types of output that we can get. So here we have this sort of tiled chart that we can get. This is a geographic chart, of course. And again, there's an aspect of hierarchy associated with this. You can click into these bits here and drill down into Germany, for example, and into state region. And as we're doing that, these charts are being updated in the background. So if I click on a particular region here, you can see they're just subtly shifting up and down because we're basically filtering the data each point. Here we have the inferred demographics in terms of their education. So it's really filtering. Again, if I go back here to this point up here, up to all, the top of the hierarchy, and click on the US, here we can see, for example, what is the primary product of interest that they have. So, the top green bit here this is effectively a little dashboard, a little gauge we've got. You can see the top green bit here is the sort of top 50%, and we can see that for the US, for example, here, that they're into they're above 25% of people who are looking at high performance products. Whereas I guess if I click on India, let's see if that changes it. If I click back here in India, yeah, you can see that actually they've got quite a lot of interest relative to the US in customer intelligence products. So we can kind of see how these things affect. In the same sense here, if we click on inferred demographics here, you can see that they start to appear within the pie chart, so we can see where these groups are. So if I say, for example, wealthy, as one would expect, the wealthy group has a fairly large proportion within college graduates. Remember, we're still filtering here on India. So if we want to switch that off, we just go back to the main group here, click on wealthy. You can see it's coming in graduate plus. And as I click each of these, of course, we're seeing a larger and larger proportion. We're seeing where these different inferred demographics appear within this other chart here, which is their education against their income. So this could easily be product groups. This could be product groups by region, for example, or by division, or by it could be different customer segments broken down by different lines of businesses and showing how they interact with each other. So we've got a bunch of other things here. Digital engagement and play with. Here we've got a slider, slide up and down, say, yeah, I'm looking at, this is a little tool here where we've got engagement level for visual analytics against engagement points. So they kind of created this little scale. And you can click again on a specific tool like Visual Analytics, or you can say I'm interested in customer intelligence. And you can scroll through this. You could pick a kind of date range if you like, and then say, well, how have these changed over time as you scroll through it? And it will show you different groups. So North America, each color represents a different region, where the level of engagement is, and whether it's falling or increasing over time for a specific area of analytics, or a line of business within the SAS line of businesses here. So high performance analytics, data management, visual analytics, etc., etc. And again, we can nest that by we can filter that by visitor type. We can look at new visitors versus returning visitors and interact with the chart accordingly. What else have we got? Well, we've got campaigns and attribution. So this is a little bit more busy now. This is it's kind of similar to the sorts of output you might see in something like Excel or a spreadsheet. This is really talking about individual campaign effectiveness here. So I could say, well, okay, we've got certain campaigns. We've got a Bloomberg campaign, we've got CIO US online, and as we click on that, it starts to filter out and just show me, what the ad referring site is for CIO US online, and what the ad impressions is, what the ad clicks are. So it's the effectiveness of this online campaign, and of course, as I right-click and start to add more campaigns and more groups in, it's starting to show more of these values and the total associated with them. So this is a very, very much a classic report. It's a combination of tabular reporting, because we've got a sort of table down here, and of course it's a bunch of bar charts across the top here. We've got bar charts for click-through rate and website conversion rate. So the green is the website conversion, the blue is the click-through rate at that point. Okay. So another little example here of another type of piece of output. Let's have a look at digital search terms. This is quite interesting. So now we have, what search terms people are using when they're searching to arrive at this website. You can see that the most common search term, as you would expect, is just SAS. It's just 62%. And we can say show us the top 10, or we can say restrict it to just show me the top 6. And as I do so, it starts to filter these out. And we can see different search terms and where they're peaking and troughing over time. So we can get rid of that. So we can say, let's just look at the search term here. This is which is customer intelligence. And you see it starts to actually highlight these points. As you can see, with subtle little circles here. If I picked on Visual Analytics, I could select it from this part of the table. You can see it's highlighted down here, and it shows me where Visual Analytics is. Or alternatively, you can just filter out everybody else and just look at just these individual products or lines of businesses. And again, you can filter them in terms of dates. So you only look at them whether they're trending up or down. So again, quite useful for an interesting way to look at almost your website traffic, the campaign effectiveness, what people are looking for, whether it's trending up or down, and represent it in this nice, easy to use, pretty intuitive graphical interface. What else have we got? Okay, we've got a bunch of other things. We've got things like segmentation that we can talk about. They've got various inferred segmentation, but I think you get the idea of of how these reports are surfaced, if you like. What might be more interesting is how they're actually made. How do these reports get developed, and what if you just want to be able to do some sort of ad hoc analysis, if you like. Well, if we come back here to the hub, to the home, if you like, and go to something called, something's happened here. Let's try this. Might be. Okay. Might be I've lost connection. No, not seem to go away. It's okay. So anyway, I've clicked on I've clicked on Data Explorer here. Click on Data Explorer, and this is very much a little ad hoc tool. It's just a little tool for us to play around with. And I've got along the bottom here in this particular report, I'm just going to close down a filter here that I don't need. I've got a bunch of other visualizations that have already been created. I'm just going to allude to them very briefly rather than talk through them. Suffice to say that on SAS's YouTube channel, a lot of these specific analytical tools, they've actually done specific little videos about, for example, decision trees. Decision trees is part of visual statistics. Decision trees are a way to build a predictive model that shows people who are most likely to, let's say, respond to an offer, or people who are most likely to revisit a website within a certain period of time, or people who are likely to churn. So they're very, they're machine learning tools. In the same sense here, we've got, classic segmentation approaches like cluster analysis for clustering similar cases together. We've got a little clustering tab down there. We've got logistic regression, again, classic sort of statistical tool. These are parts of the visual statistics, and it's, as we said at the start, part of the purpose of visual analytics and visual statistics is to try and produce or try and provide a one-stop shop for all sorts of analytics. So we don't need to focus on all of these sort of high-end analytics at this point in time. Let's just have a look at producing some charts here. So I'm connected to some data. I've got some data that's available to me. This is digital clickstream data, and visual analytics is good because it immediately starts to group together the different fields in terms of their nature. So we've got a bunch of category fields here, which you can see the category fields here are things like the browser version that's used. You saw earlier on inferred education status, inferred customer life stage. These are categories. Other types of fields that we have are geographical fields. So, where are these people? What city are they in? What continent they're in? There are hierarchical fields. You saw me doing a drill down, or I was drilling down through different groups there. So you can use a hierarchical set of fields. Then you have measures themselves. These are continuous fields. And you also have your derived fields. So if you want to be able to create new measures, you can do so. So if I just wanted to build a chart here, what we find is it's got an auto charting facility, and the auto charting facility just allows me to create a chart on the fly, if you like. So I could pick something like, let's see, browser. And so we click up browser and just drag that across. And as you can imagine, a typical way to represent that would be to do it as a bar chart. And that's just the auto charting, taking account of the type of field that it is and automatically coming up with. Now, if I wanted to, instead of showing the frequency count, but I wanted actually to show, I don't know, let's say the costs associated with that, or the click-through rate associated with different browsers, I could drag that across and either drop that onto the chart as well. Now that the frequency has been changed to ad click-through rate average, so it's showing me the mean click-through rate, and the mean click-through rate is for other browsers, whatever they are, but they tend to have a higher click-through rate. Internet Explorer has a higher click-through rate than, say, Safari on its own here, so we can play around with that. If you want to remove any of these, you just remove them. So it's very intuitive, very simple to play around with. Other things you can do, which I find quite useful, is you can go to create your own filters and play around with them. So if I go here to geography, for example, you can see here it's telling me the cardinality, that's the count for the category. So I've got continent here. If I drag that across, I can have it, as it says here, drop items here to filter all visualizations using this data source, or drop items here just to filter this visualization. So again, if I just want to filter it, I can switch off all of the countries and say, no, just show me Europe and North America, and it would show me those appropriately versus others. So it's very intuitive, very simple to play around with, and you've got these various little tabs here which control the formatting and the roles that the fields play, and also some fancy stuff like parameterization and the colors and filtering, etc., etc. If I just get rid of this little visualization and just delete it, because after all, we're just playing around here. And if I choose something like state region here from geography and drag that across, well, this is a geographical field, of course, so we'd expect it to represent it geographically, and that's exactly what it does. It shows us a bunch of countries. Now, I have to be quite careful here because the response time across the Atlantic is a little bit on the slow side. So as I zoom in here, I just need to be a little bit careful. As you can see, here's Europe coming up at this point. And again, with regard to the circle size here is really just it's just referring to the fact that those are the number of records we've got in those areas. If I click on this bit here again, I'll just zoom out. If I want the circle size to represent something else, I could say, well, I want the circle size, let's say, to represent, I don't know, ad cost or something like that. We could put an ad cost in here, and we can add it in, and it changes circle size so it reflects ad cost, etc., etc. So you can move your cursor over that. You can see for Connecticut what the ad cost is versus for, down here for Tipperary what the ad cost is, or for around Essex or London, and so on and so on. So we can start to represent geographical information. What about when we want to represent some of these hierarchical measures? If I pick up, say, a hierarchical measure, and I can either get it to auto chart, or I can say, I deliberately want one of these tiled, what we call a tree map here, and say I want a tree map, and I want a tree map that shows, I don't know, hierarchical geographies, let's say. So I could drag that across and put that in, and it will produce, as you can see, one of these little tree maps that we had here before. And again, just for fun, I'll add in a measure here, and I'll say, okay, let's look at the click-through rate. We'll drag that across. This is an alternative way to represent this. I just drag this and just pick this up. There we go. Pick it up, drag it across, and it gives me a click-through rate. It updates that. If I don't like the colors, I can go down here and choose a different color gradient. I'll do that. And of course, it's hierarchical. So again, I can double-click on this, and it goes into North America, into US, and then we can go to New York. We double-click into New York, and then we've got, we can go to different sets, parts of it, until we reach the right at the bottom of the hierarchy. So this is, again, a very simple way to do ad hoc analyses. What if we wanted to represent a whole bunch of continuous fields together, or measures, as we call them here? I could just pick up a whole bunch of measures here. Let me just pick up these guys, drag them across. What's it going to do if I do that? Well, what it does is it shows a correlation value. And a correlation is a way of showing the strength of the relationship between one field and another. So it's very good when you're looking at, demographic information such as age against things like spend, against spend in different areas, or time on spent visiting a website, anything which we've got a series of measures and you want to show the relationship between them. And you could add in, for example here, I could put in inferred age, inferred income, pages visited, that type of stuff, and just enrich it a little bit, chuck it in a little bit more. You can see the really strong correlations here are, the relationship between ad clicks and ad cost, which we'd kind of expect. There's quite a strong relationship here between ad impressions and ad clicks, and ad cost and ad impressions. And then, pages visited and whether or not they're active to 10 to 30 minutes. So obviously if they've been on the site excuse me, a lot longer, that you'd expect them to visit more pages. And then the really weak relationships are shown here, which are, active over 30 minutes. Doesn't have much of a relationship between ad impressions or clicks and so on and so on. And it's just a very nice way for us to again show the relationship between many fields and literally spot, strong correlations, strong relationships. Okay, let's say we wanted to do something a little bit more in the vein of predictive analytics. Let's say we wanted to actually do some sort of forecasting or prediction here. Well, I've got some fields here that are related to time. So, for example, I've got session ID, which tells me if I just search for it. There's a lot of fields in there. Session ID. Just to make sure I've got this. That's the count. That's the number of sessions. Oh, that's the actual ID. So this is the number of sessions. This is the measure. And if I just click on that, there should be something about visitor date in here. So if I just again highlight this and look for visitor date, and maybe I can do a sort of timeline. There's a visitor date, and if I control click on that and drag it across, you can see it still remembers I've got the session ID count, and it just basically gives me a little chart. It shows me, the number of visitors you're getting over time to this particular website across a fairly limited range of time from about the 20th of April up to about the 6th of May. So this is a fairly simple little chart. You can see that on this chart here that there's kind of a trough there. That might be a mistake. It might be an extreme value. You could right-click on this and say, I want to get rid of that. Get rid of it or delete it or remove it or something like that. So I could say, remove that particular date, or or hide it in some way, or filter it out if I wanted to. And if you want to remove that particular date, you just get rid of it effectively. The alternative would be to say, no, it's legitimate. I want to keep it in there. Let me just make sure it's switched to a line chart here. Switch to a line chart type. Yeah, so I say, include only selection or exclude selection. I can get rid of these or remove these individual fields. Get rid of them. But one of the things I can do is I can actually say, no, it's legitimate. It's, there aren't very many cases here, and you can see that I'm only looking at the end of the data set. There's actually a lot more. And I can, zoom into parts of it, or I can show the whole thing as I so wish. So it's, it's pretty easy for me to just, zoom in and look at the individual bits. But if I wanted to, do some sort of prediction or forecast, I could right-click on this point and say, okay, well, show me the forecast. And what it does is it extrapolates out into the future. So suddenly we have a forecast that's going out into the future and saying, well, this is what I think the sessions count is going to look like over the next 6 days or so. If I don't like the fact, if I need more detail than that, then I can go excuse me, to the reports here and say, no, I don't want 6 days, I need 14 days, and then hit apply at that point, and it'll just take it out across 14 days, so next 2 weeks. The sort of shaded area around it refers to the 95% confidence interval. So we'll never know, of course, what the true session count will be, how many visits they're going to get until that time happens. But the forecast estimates that there's for example, on this particular date here, the 13th of May, there's a 95% chance it's going to be between 1,500 and this value here, just under 1,200, so it's going to be somewhere in that zone, it thinks. So that's kind of interesting, the fact that we can play around with this. But more importantly, if I click on this little information button down here, it actually tells me what I'm looking at. It says, well, the forecast shows the predicted values of the measure based on historical data. It's automatically done this. How has it done it? Well, it's using session ID, and it's actually using an algorithm which is called exponential smoothing. It will use different algorithms based upon the type of data that's presented with. So it may use exponential smoothing this time, it may use something like an ARIMA model next time around, and it will try to fit the correct model to the pattern of data. So it's quite intelligent in that sense. In terms of the actual data that's underpinning this, if I go to results here, Here's the historical data starting around about the 26th of March. And of course, as we scroll down through it, we get into this sort of shaded area, and this is, again, the forecast itself. So it's showing me the lower 95% confidence interval, the upper 95% confidence interval, and the forecast itself for the next 14 days. And I can right-click on this and just export that data directly out if I so wished as a CSV file and then read it into Excel, for example. So there's a whole bunch of things I can do here which are really useful and very quickly, very painlessly be able to produce a forecast. Now, what might be interesting is, there may be some sort of relationship here between the number of visitors we're getting and other factors. So we've got some other factors here which are denoted by the term visit flag. So we've got visit flag here. Some of these visits are coming direct to the website. Some of them are being promoted through, social media. Some of them are being promoted through blogs or through affiliated sites. And some of them are actually through paid searches. So, the organization or SAS may well be, using paid searches to drive more traffic to their site. It may well be that, these, whether or not the number of people who are blog visitors versus number of people who are social visitors versus the number of people who are coming here by organic search, it may be that actually helps us estimate, the number of visitors we're going to get. In other words, they may be related directly to that, or they may not be. So if I pick them up and drag them across here and release them at that point, it says, what do you want to do? Do you want to assign them as a measure or what's called an underlying factor? An underlying factor is, do you want me to use these to try and predict, to forecast whether or not, how much traffic you're going to get over the next 2 weeks? And if I choose underlying factor, again, it's very clear because if I come back here, you can see that it's only chosen 2. This top chart that we're getting here is our overall visit traffic that's coming in. This is the organic search traffic. This is the paid search traffic that's coming in. And it hasn't used affiliate or blog or direct because they're not strongly related to it. They don't really make a difference. They don't help us predict the outcome. They are not in the parlance of statistics, they are not significant. Now, if you're the business and you're trying to drive more traffic to the website, there's not much you can do about organic search apart from above the line marketing really to try and get people to look at your adverts or something like that. But paid search you can probably do something about. And one of the nice things that we can play around with here is something called scenario analysis. You heard somebody talking about what-if analysis at the start here. If I want to see the effect of increasing the paid search visits on the overall count, I can do that just by playing around with the values here. So you can see here I'm just dragging them up at this point. I'm just going to interact with the data and just drag it up. Again, it's a little bit on the sluggish side because it is on a server somewhere in North Carolina, I believe. Here's the original paid search visit. Here's our new sort of theoretical one. If I hit apply at that point, it just updates it and it shows in the top overall visitor traffic the effect of that. Here's the grey line, which was our original forecast. This is the effect of adding that in there. So we can really play around with this, or I can hit close at that point, or go back here to these values here. Go back into scenario analysis here, and say, well, I don't want to play around with it manually. Instead, I'd rather set some values and say, okay, well, what happens if I just increase it all by, I don't know, $100, or increase it progressively by, or set all the values to the same number, or just double the amount. If I say increase everything by 100% and click OK, that, and then hit apply, it shows me the effect of on the traffic to the website of increasing these things by 100% at that point in time. Now, this is kind of interesting because now we're doing some sort of what-if analysis. We're seeing what the effect is of increasing paid search visits, and we're doing some, we're going beyond simple BI here. We're well into the realm of predictive analytics. We could have been using cluster analysis. We could have been doing logistic regression, or we could have been doing decision trees. It just so happened we've picked the ability of visual analytics and visual statistics to do forecasting as a nice way to illustrate this. But if I wanted to incorporate this back into the original visualizations that you saw when we were at the report viewer, what if I think this is really useful and I want to incorporate it? Well, you remember that at the original hub there we had the report viewers that we clicked on, we had the Explorer that we're now currently in, and we also had the designer, which allows us to design this report that we're creating. If I click the digital intelligence here, this is now we're in the designer here, and in the designer here we've got exactly the same report that you saw me using earlier on. We can interact with this and play around with it. So this is where it was designed, this is where it was created, and it was created in exactly the same way that I was creating the charts earlier on. This is just all of the different charts that make up this report. If I go to imports here, I could import that particular chart. So I could go and say, well, I've already done a digital exploration, and I haven't saved. You didn't see me explicitly save that chart, but I'd already done it in the background. I didn't want to create a copy of it, but I've already done that. And I say, well, I want to add this new chart that I've created, and if I right-click it and say, yeah, this is the one I want to add, and I can just add it to this report and say, yeah, this is the one I want, and I could drag it down and add it into this little report if I so wished. Yeah, so this is quite a useful way for us to create something on the fly and then add it to our existing report. If we don't like it there, I can probably just drag it down into the corner here and I'll just put it down there. Probably a bit nicer place to put it. And you remember that there were sort of interactions here that we had. Well, again, in the designer we can define the interaction. So I can say, look at the interaction view here, and I can define an interaction. So you can see that these charts originally were linked, so that when I clicked on a segment here, it was reflected in the bar chart, or when I clicked on a range of values here, it was reflected in the bar chart, or reflected in the pie chart. In the same sense here, if I could connect or define a connection between this chart, let's say, and the pie chart itself. So you can see here that if I can just get this little thing to come up, I can define this connection. Actually, I might need to do it the other way around. It's just a little bit slow. Okay, so that's been defined. Now if I go back and say, okay, well, close that down, let's see what the effect of that is. Of course, this is now an interaction. So as I start to highlight these points here, they're actually reflected in this. You see these numbers shifting around a little bit here. So I select just these points here. These numbers are shifting around, as are the charts here, because what we're doing is we're selecting, traffic to the site across a specific range of dates. Now, obviously, if I go out into the future and select these values in the future, what happens? Of course, all of these charts disappear. These charts disappear because we don't know at this point, what browsers they're going to use, what operating system they're going to use. We haven't forecasted that at that point. But this is how easy it is just to define the interaction. Going back to the report viewer, we could then surface that as a digital intelligence report and deploy it back out to the wider business for people to use on their and browse on their laptops or on their PCs or on their phones, etc. Okay, so that's a little overview there. We've touched on the report viewer and how we can use the report viewer and interact with reports that have been pre-built. We've touched on the Explorer and the different ways in which we can get it to create ad hoc charts for us. And then we've gone to the designer and we've augmented an existing report with a new chart that we created in Explorer and even defined an interaction between it, which is very easy to do. So key features of it, there's a bunch of key features. I guess the main thing I really wanted to leave you with is that, if you want to find out more information about visual analytics and visual statistics, a good spot is to go onto YouTube and look at SAS's various YouTube videos associated with it. There's a bunch of stuff here which I haven't been able to show you. I haven't been able to show you word clouds or text sentiment analysis. But basically, there's a whole bunch of different little procedures which make this add up to quite an impressive platform for analytics, generally speaking. If you want to find out more about us, by all means go and join our mailing list and visit our website. Hope you do that. And in the meantime, sign up for any future web sessions that we're going to do, and we look forward to hearing from you again at some point in the future. Thanks for logging in.